They live is partially a political statement, it's partially a tract on the world that we live in today. And as a matter of fact, right now, it's even more true than it was then. We are manipulated by a lot of media around us. We are consumed by consumerism. And as you can see in the recent events in this country, they are still among us. They do live.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
The truth hurts because the truth is all there is. The truth hurts because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth. You can't hide.
Welcome to the show that explores the social dynamics and psychological forces that shape our world, much like the pecking order in a chicken coop. Why is society structured in rigid hierarchies? Why do we instinctively follow authority? And how is our belief in this structure manipulated to control us? We'll explore the layers of social conditioning, the psychology behind obedience, the hidden mind control techniques that influence our lives, and the universal moral laws that stand in stark contrast to manufactured authority. This is the Coop Files. Welcome. Today's date is Tuesday, the 13th of May. Welcome to episode 4. The usual housekeeping. Who is this show for? It's for me. Who is this show not for? All of the people who I'm fed up of being surrounded by, the statists, people who have unwavering loyalty to the state, the conformists, people who go along to get along. They know it's a mushroom, but they're not going to say anything because everybody else isn't, so they must be wrong. The authoritarians, people who believe, again, unwaveringly in the religion of authority, people who hate freedom, the atheist left-brainers, people who unwaveringly believe in scientism and that there is only a physical element to the universe, the closed-minded children who cry like a baby when you say something that hurts their feelings, even if it's true, the emotionally and spiritually immature, again, the people with childlike mentalities, the thin-skinned, those who oppose the truth, who enjoy their comfort. They'd rather just watch Netflix or the football, regardless of what's going on around them. The self-loathing, people who are so traumatized and self-loathing that they can't confront anything that goes against their belief system, their erroneous belief systems. This is episode 4. We're going to cover morality in nature. What is nature's law of morality? Natural law is a philosophical and legal theory that posits the existence of a set of inherent laws derived from nature and universal moral principles, which are discoverable through reason. Reason is the capacity of consciously applying logic by drawing valid conclusions from new or existing information with the aim of seeking the truth. It is associated with such characteristically human activities as philosophy, religion, science, language, mathematics, and art, and is normally considered to be a distinguishing ability possessed by humans. Normally, reason is something sometimes referred to as rationality. It's rational. Reasoning involves using more or less rational processes of thinking and cognition to extrapolate from one's existing knowledge to generate new knowledge, and involves the use of one's intellect. The field of logic studies the ways in which humans can use formal reasoning to produce logical, valid arguments and true conclusions. True conclusions around morality. Natural law holds that there are objective legal standards based on morality that underlie and inform the creation, interpretation, and application of human-made laws. This contrasts with positive law, as in legal positivism, which emphasizes that laws are rules created by human authorities and are not necessarily connected to moral principles. Freedom is the right to choose between right and wrong, freedom or slavery. Let's cover objective morality. Objective morality, the cornerstone of the moral argument, is the existence of an objective moral standard. If there really is a standard of right and wrong that holds true regardless of our opinions and emotions, then the moral argument has the ability to convince. However, apart from the existence of such an objective standard, moral arguments for God's existence and Christian theism quickly lose their persuasive power, and morality as a whole falls to the realm of subjective preference. Here are 8 arguments raised in favor of objective morality. Number 1. Quarrelling between 2 or more individuals. When quarrelling occurs, individuals assume there is an objective standard of right and wrong, of which each person is aware, and one has broken. Why quarrel if no objective standard exists? By definition, quarrelling or arguing involves trying to show another person that he is right or wrong, and there is no point in trying to do that unless there is some sort of agreement as to what right and wrong actually is. Just like there is no sense in saying a football player has committed a foul if there is no agreement about the rules of football. So there is no point in arguing if there is no understanding of what right and wrong is. It's obvious, number 2, it's obvious that an objective moral standard exists. Throughout history, mankind has generally agreed that the human idea of decent behavior is obvious to everyone. For example, it's obvious or self-evident that torturing a child for fun is morally reprehensible. As a young child, I could easily recognize that certain things are obviously right or wrong. For example, while watching a movie like Star Wars, I could easily point out the good characters as well as the bad ones, even without my parents' help. In short, the overwhelming obviousness that certain acts are clearly right or wrong indicates that an objective moral standard exists. The Empire was bad and the rebels were good. Excuse me. Number 3, mistreatment. One might say he does not believe in objective morality. However, the moment he is mistreated, he will react as if such a standard exists. When one denies the existence of an objective standard of behavior, the moment he is mistreated, he will be complaining it's not fair before you can say government. You'll imagine I'm arguing moral objectivity with a friend who responded by saying, I couldn't force my views on others because everything is relative. That's what the moral relativist would say. Following this claim, in an effort to reveal what my friend really believed about moral issues, I picked up his mobile phone from the table and began to walk out the pub. He immediately shouted, Hey, what are you doing? You can't do that. Why not? Why can't I steal your property? If everything is relative, then surely it's up to me and my belief system as to whether or not I can do that. It's obvious that it's objectively true that I can't steal your property, and you know it because you're now complaining. All of a sudden, the friend is not in favour of moral relativism. Again, one might deny the existence of an objective standard or of behaviour through his words or actions, but he will always reveal what he really believes through his reactions when mistreated. Taking your natural rights to property. Number 4, measuring value systems. When an individual states that one value system is better than another or attempts to replace a particular value system with a better one, he assumes there is an objective standard of judgment. This objective standard of judgment, which is different from either value system, helps one conclude that one value system conforms more closely to the moral standard than another. Without some sort of objective measuring stick for value systems, there is no way to conclude that civilized morality, where humans treat one another with dignity and respect, is better than savage morality, where humans brutally murder others, even within their own tribe at times, for various reasons. In terms of civilized value systems, if there is no objective moral standard, then there is no sense in saying that any one value system has ever been morally good or morally bad, or morally superior or inferior to another value system. There has to be a way of measuring them that we all agree on objectively. There is no basis for your argument. It must be based on objective right and wrong. Were the National Socialists of Germany wrong? Did they live a good moral standard? How do we know if everything's subjective? You have a moral obligation to do the right thing. Number 5, attempting to improve morality. Countless individuals attempt to improve themselves morally on a daily basis. No sane person wakes up and declares, my goal is to become more immoral today. There is no absolute standard of good which exists. If there is no absolute standard of good which exists, then talk of moral improvement is nonsensical, and actual moral progress is impossible. If no ultimate standard of right and wrong exists, then one might change his actions but he can never improve his morality. If there is hope of moral improvement, then there must be some sort of absolute standard of good that exists above and outside the process of improvement. In other words, there must be a target for humans to aim their moral efforts at, and also a ruler by which to measure moral progress. Without an objective moral standard of behaviour, then there is no sense in talking of becoming better, if better means simply what we are becoming. We have to become something better, not just what we are becoming, based on subjective rules of morality. It is like congratulating yourself on reaching your destination and defining destination as the place you have reached. Well, we're here, so it must be the right place. Surely you would have a destination in mind, and then you would celebrate and be happy once you got to the said destination. You don't just randomly go somewhere and say and declare we've arrived. Surely when you choose your own free will to go somewhere, the idea is that it is better than where you left, otherwise why bother? It would seem to me that what we are becoming is objectively immoral. The current place we are at has degraded from what it was. That's society today. They are objectively immoral as a group in the aggregate. Where we are today has degraded from where we were in years gone by. I remember society being a hell of a lot more moral and having values and principles back in the 70s and 80s when I was young. And that's not to say it was perfect, but it's definitely degraded. Number 6, reasoning over moral issues. When men reason over moral issues, it is assumed there is an objective standard of right and wrong. If there is no objective standard, then reasoning over moral issues is on the same level as one arguing with his friend about the best pint of beer at the local pub. In short, a world where morality is a matter of preference makes it impossible to have meaningful conversations over issues like adultery, sexuality, abortion, immigration, drugs, bullying, stealing, and so on. What's the point in even having those conversations if we haven't got an objective standard? I actually feel that most people have this truth totally inverted in their heads. I think that most people believe that their taste is the truth, and what is right or wrong is relative. What matters to them is, will I get away with it? So I've had arguments, or I've witnessed arguments where you're actually arguing over taste, and people have an attachment to that taste and they think they're right. And if your taste is different, be it beer, food, clothing, fashion, whatever, if your taste is different, then they look down on you, and they need to feel that they're right and that you're wrong, but it's just taste. Whereas when it comes to actual morality and doing the right thing or doing something which is wrong, the only thing that matters to them is, will I get away with it? And that drives the decision. Well, it may be wrong, but I'll get away with it. I know many, many people, or I've come across many, many people who behave exactly like that. Number 7, feeling a sense of obligation over moral matters. The words ought and ought not imply the existence of an objective moral law that mankind recognizes and feels obliged to follow. Virtually all humans would agree that one ought to try to save the life of a drowning child, and that one ought to not kill innocent people for sheer entertainment. It is also perfectly intelligible to believe that humans are morally obligated to possess traits such as compassion, mercifulness, generosity, and courage. Courage to do the right thing, regardless of the consequences. That is your obligation, and that is courage. Courage is the ability to do what's right, even if you feel fear. Courage is not a lack of fear, but the ability to force through it regardless in order to do the right thing. Doing the right thing is not something I witness an awful lot of in society. Courage is not following orders for fear of the consequences of not doing so. Comfort. I'm not going to do it because it feels uncomfortable. Follow your own orders, the order of what is right above what is wrong. And then the image there, you can choose comfort or you can choose courage, but you can't choose both. Not making excuses. Making excuses for not behaving appropriately. If you do not believe in an objective standard of behavior, then why should you become anxious to make excuses for how you've behaved in any given circumstances? Why don't you just go on with your life without defending yourself? After all, you don't have to defend yourself if there is no standard for you to fall short of. Why are you making excuses if you've done nothing wrong? Because you know deep down you've done something wrong. You know there's an objective right and wrong. The truth is, we believe in decency so much, we feel the rule of law pressing on us so, that we cannot bear to face the fact that we are breaking it, and consequently we try to shift the responsibility. It is embedded into nature. We know the truth subconsciously. We make excuses to avoid guilt and shame. Why bother doing that if there is no objective standard? And why try and shift responsibility if you haven't done anything wrong? It's, again, a human trait that you see all of the time. People know when they've done something wrong, and quite often, because they're childlike in their mentality, they try and shift the responsibility. These 8 reasons alone do not cover all of the reasons for understanding objective morality, but it is a starting point or a primer. The reasons I've covered are valid, and therefore the moral argument for the existence of a higher intelligence or standard of morality also has validity. In fact, if there are any good reasons for believing in an objective moral standard, then I think the existence of a higher intelligence than man becomes the best possible explanation for morality, since such a standard at the least requires a transcendent, good and personal source, which sounds a lot like God to me. This is not a religion, this is truth, probably the most important and occulted truth in the known universe. If there is a moral standard which is embedded into nature, which no man created this law, it's been there since time immemorial, then, and it's encoded into the fabric of nature, into the fabric of the universe, then who put it there? Again, probably the most important and occulted truth in the known universe, that we are governed, our behaviors are governed by a natural law which has always been in existence and always will be in existence, and nobody can change it. Not like a man-made law written on a bit of paper that can be changed. Morality exists in nature, the natural law of the land, which enables freedom. Man's law is subjective, can change, and leads to chaos and slavery, which is where we are now. Complete chaos and slavery. Someone else decides how you behave. That's slavery. Masters who write down on a piece of paper how you should behave. There are around 11,000 pieces of legislation on the statute books in the United Kingdom, most of them petty. Something like 70 new pieces of legislation or man-made laws every year are added. How can anybody fathom how to behave when there's that many petty man-made laws? Well, you don't. You go out with your common sense into the world, and you should know the difference between right and wrong, and that'll generally keep you on the right path. We don't need all of these petty man-made laws, and if any of the man-made laws are aligned with natural law and morality, then we don't need to write them down on a piece of paper. It's simple.
Stone house with the warmth going round, but your life felt a little bit harder. Safe ground, it's never what you needed to feel proud. Get everything depleted. Stone house with the warmth going round, but your life felt a little bit harder. Safe ground, it's never what you needed to feel proud. Get everything depleted. Goodbye, the chameleon, a hazard disguise, one too big for demise. I see your arms spread warm in a shadow over my head. Thanks for the things you've done. When my mouth falls over, let the words keep that sound. I see the place you're from in a lock from the remedies. Stone house with the warmth going round, but your life felt a little bit harder. Safe ground, it's never what you needed to feel proud. Get everything depleted. Stone house with the warmth going round, but your life felt a little bit harder. Safe ground, it's never what you needed to feel proud. Get everything depleted. You chose the invisible, stacked on your shoulders, never turning around. I see your arms spread warm in a shadow over my head. Now I've gotten older, not sure how to hold her, but I can pull down. I see the place you're from in a lock from the remedies. Stone house with month going round, but July felt a little bit harder. Safe ground, it's never what you needed to feel proud. You're everything but greeted. Stone house with the month going round, but July felt a little bit harder. Safe ground, it's never what you needed.
So, to recap, natural law in its simplest form refers to a type of moral theory that asserts the existence of objective, universal moral laws that we can decipher through plain reason and logic. Nobody is above that law. Natural law definitions: natural, inherent, having a basis in nature, reality, and truth, not made or caused by humankind. Law, an existing condition which is binding and immutable, cannot be changed. Equality under natural law. Government is nothing but men acting in concert. The morality and value of government, like any other association of men, will be no greater and no less than the morality and value of the men comprising it. Since government is nothing but men, its inherent authority to act is in no way greater or different than the authority to act of individuals in isolation. Government has no magical powers or authority not possessed by private individuals. Let he who asserts that government may do that which the individual may not assume the onus of proof and demonstrate his contention. Somehow we've given a magical power to government and authority, a magical power that we don't possess. An individual cannot tell another individual how to act, insist on how they act. You can tell them the difference between right and wrong, but you can't insist they act in any way. That person would be your slave. There is no magical power that exists, so I can't give that magical power to a group of men. Neither can you, neither can 51% acting in unison give that magical power to a government, because that 51% acting in unison do not possess that magical power. Natural law definitions, examples. Natural law is a theory asserting that certain rights or values are inherent by virtue of human nature and can be universally understood through human reason. It posits that these laws are immutable and unchangeable, serving as a basis for morality and justice throughout human history. It's very, very simple, the definition of natural law. Examples are the right to life, pursuit of happiness, family bonds, property ownership, self-defense, truth-telling, religious freedom, and reproduction rights. 15 natural law examples. Human dignity. Throughout cultures and histories, there exists the idea that every human being should be treated with dignity and respect just due to their nature as humans. This principle, inherently known and accepted, is an example of natural law. It transcends artificial boundaries and forms the basis for many human rights policies today. Not that we need any human rights policies, but it's obviously the basis that is used as the foundation of being able to determine what our rights are. Even in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, prescribed by the UN, the ethos of human dignity is cemented in the preamble itself. Recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom. So even the UN know that our inalienable rights is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Universal Declaration, 1948. So again, I am no supporter of the United Nations, but obviously there are some philosophical truths embedded into a lot of these declarations in the past. How we've come to the place we are is anybody's guess. This embodies the concept of natural law as it puts forth a universal moral code applicable to all mankind. Prohibition of theft. Man-made criminal laws universally acknowledge that stealing or theft is inherently morally wrong, which is in line with natural law. Whether it's modern jurisdictions like man-made law that has categorized theft under various degrees, like petty theft and grand theft, or ancient civilizations, the principle against stealing is inherently accepted against different cultures and timelines. This universal agreement on the moral invalidity of theft illustrates the existence of a higher moral order beyond human-made laws, presenting a real-world example of natural law. Theft of any type, including your natural rights which are being eroded by the day. That's theft. Your right to enjoy the fruits, 100% of the fruits of your labour is, we've covered this, it's taxation, is theft, and therefore immoral. Prohibition of murder. The prohibition of murder is a clear embodiment of natural law. The law, unlike civil or criminal laws, this law, unlike civil or criminal laws, is universally accepted and understood without the need for formal legislation. What I said before, you don't need to write this down and it doesn't need to be legislated. I don't need some sociopath in a suit to tell me that murder is wrong. It is inherently understood that taking another human life unjustly is morally wrong. Unjustly is an interesting word when it comes to natural law because it's part of the self-defense principle. Can you justly take another life? Unjustly is obviously morally wrong. Whether expressed in the commandment, thou shalt not kill, in the Bible and Torah, or in the laws of ancient societies like the Roman Empire that held unlawful killing as a grave offence, the prohibition of murder illustrates the concept of natural law. In other words, we all know this. How do we all know it? Because it's embedded into the fabric of reality. Number 4, the right to self-defense. Another real-world application of natural law is the concept of self-defense. This universally accepted principle dictates that a person has the right to protect him or herself from harm. While different legal systems have various nuances in laws concerning self-defense, the core understanding remains consistent. Everybody has a right to protect their own life when threatened. And again, you can't have nuances. You have a right to defend yourself when you're being threatened or when you see a threat coming your way. The United Nations basic principle on the use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials recognizes self-defense as a basic human right. This common understanding supersedes man-made laws, asserts the presence of natural law. Use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials. Obviously, there's a big flaw in that when it comes to law enforcement, because obviously the laws that are being enforced aren't natural in the vast majority of cases. But the point here is that it's obviously embedded into these basic principles because they know that you have a right to use a firearm to defend yourself. Obviously, those rights are being eroded across the pond in the US, and those rights have been completely stolen from us here in the UK due to very, very suspicious events like Dunblane and I think it was the Hungerford. Very, very, very suspicious events. Number 5, duty to honour promises and contracts. The duty to honour promises and contracts, a pillar of trust and cooperation in human society, suffices as an evident example of natural law. This universally recognized principle implies that when individuals make promises or sign contracts, they are ethically and morally bound to keep their word. So, a promise, obviously, when we sign a contract, it has a different meaning because we are signing a legal contract, and you would go through the man-made legal system to resolve any breaking of said contract. But obviously, it's recognized that that is ethical and moral, which is true. But promise or your word, before we had a legal system or we signed contracts in the world of commerce, we would have known, we would have had a universal understanding, a natural understanding that a man's word means something, and that is just an unwritten contract which is bound by natural law and doing the right thing. That's always existed. That's not man-made. Experience shows that societies function smoothly when this principle is adhered to, since it forms the bedrock of personal, professional, and legal relationships. For example, modern legal systems enforce contractual obligations through the law of contracts, and breaching such obligations can result in substantial penalties. This reflects a commitment to the natural law principle of keeping one's word, a concept ingrained in human relationships and dealings for centuries. And again, using the legal system as an example is not to promote the legal system, it's just to demonstrate that obviously these concepts are ingrained even in our control system, because we know the difference. Ultimately, deep down, we know the difference between right and wrong. It's just governments have convinced us that we can't govern ourselves, that there is no such thing as natural law, and that we need them to tell us what to do and to write things down on a piece of paper. The moral law of truth. The universally accepted principle that deception or lying is intrinsically wrong serves as another enacted facet of natural law. Again, nobody admits that they're a liar. I know dozens and dozens and dozens of liars, and they will never, ever admit that they're a liar. Even when you actually put it right in their face, the evidence, because they know it's wrong. Nobody walks around saying, yes, I'm a liar. Other than, well, I'm saying other than, it's interesting though that it's a universally accepted principle. But the people who actually write down our petty laws on a piece of paper, they universally lie continuously. The moral disapproving of lying can be found in both human legislations. In both human legislations and religious and philosophical teachings, this universal understanding further accentuates the concept of natural laws, transcending human-made laws and social norms. Number 7, the principle of restitution. The principle of restitution, or the concept of compensating for a wrong committed, is an often cited example of natural law. This concept states that if you harm someone either physically, emotionally, or monetarily, there is an inherent universal obligation to make amends for the damage done. We see this principle in action within legal systems, laws dealing with compensation for injury or loss. The legal system allows victims of harm to seek compensation from the perpetrators. So again, I'm not promoting the legal system. It's just an example of how the philosophical truth of objective morality is embedded into these systems, and you can see the foundations in things such as restitution. Even if you just use a very basic example where you've caused somebody harm, be it physically, you might have just bumped into them in the corridor, or you've knocked their drink as you walk past them. Emotionally, where you might have caused them some distress, even if it was without intent, or monetarily, where maybe you've overcharged them for a service you've provided. There's an obligation, inherent obligation, to make amends for the damage done. You obviously apologize. You will obviously buy them a drink if you spill their drink. You would obviously, apologize from the heart if you've hurt somebody unintentionally, emotionally. And obviously, monetarily, you probably would compensate them if you were a decent person. You would obviously fix the error that you've made, and then you might even give them some compensation as a goodwill gesture. This is inherent, and this is what good moral standards are. The principle of confidentiality and privacy. Over the span of time and across numerous societies, a universal agreement prevails regarding the respect for an individual's privacy. This principle of confidentiality and privacy essentially means that there are certain aspects of one's life that are private and should be respected by others. In other words, boundaries. And you can tell that left-brained people who are so egotistical, they've got zero awareness and empathy, and they've got no respect for your boundaries. They're the sorts of people who don't respect your privacy and your confidentiality, gossips, or people who will, happily just cross your boundaries, whether they're your physical boundaries or your sort of emotional boundaries, your personal sort of sort of trampling over your feelings, I think is the phrase I'm looking for. Recognition of this principle is evident in both ancient cultural norms and modern legal precedents. Even under the umbrella of international law, of human rights, emphasizes the fundamental right to privacy, stating no one shall be subject to arbitrary interference with his privacy. And again, this is something where these types of rights are being eroded as well. Our right to a private life is creeping, is diminishing. Our rights in that respect are diminishing more and more as time goes on. And at the end of the day, the PSYOP 2020 PSYOP nonsense, when people happily allowed the sociopathic government and absolute communists into their homes in terms of telling them, legislating with their petty laws about how many people, who you could have in your house, how many people you could have in your house, how many people you could have in your garden, what time you could go out, how long you could go out for. That is total interference with your own private life. What happens in your house is no business of the government's. As long as you're not causing any harm, you do what you want in your own house. The moment you let the government into your house, it's just a juggernaut coming down the highway. It will end. It won't end well. It won't end. I still cannot believe that people obeyed petty rules instead of making their own informed decisions just because a man in a suit, an overweight man in a suit who looks like a clown on the television told them so. That's where we are. That's where we are with society. Would you let me tell you what to do in your house? Would you let me tell you whether your parents can come over or your granny? And how many people you can have at a barbecue? Would you let me do that? Would you give me that magical power? These examples illuminate the role of natural law in shaping our societal, ethical, and legal outlook. Number 9, principle of justice and fairness. The principle of justice and fairness, which argues that all individuals should be treated equally and without prejudice, mirrors the concept of natural law, obviously equally under natural law without prejudice. We all have exactly the same rights under natural law. This principle means that every person, irrespective of their race, religion, gender, socio-economic status, deserves to be treated justly and fairly. For example, the principle of innocent until proven guilty, prevalent in numerous jurisdictions, stands as a testament to this inherent understanding of justice. Just going back to fairness and every person being treated the same, irrespective of their race, religion, gender, etc., etc. If anybody's aware of the two-tier justice system in this country at the minute, you'll understand how this principle is being completely violated. Again, because man-made laws are exactly that, nonsense. And they can do that when they make the rules, and they can convince you that without them, there is no law and everything would be chaotic. Then you're handing over justice and fairness to this group of people who lie, steal, cheat, and will absolutely shaft anybody for their own self-preservation. Number 10, principle of compassion and kindness. The universal value, compassion and kindness towards fellow living beings, often described as empathy, underscores the understanding of natural law. Unfortunately, a huge number of people that I have to interact with in these times have zero empathy, or very, very little empathy. Whether it's cultural, religious, or philosophical traditions advocating for compassion, like the Golden Rule, present in many religions, treat others as you would like to be treated, or scientific studies highlighting empathy as an inherent human trait, this deep-seated understanding reflects a universal natural law. The fact that we have empathy, we can put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. We have mirror neurons that can actually mirror the emotions of another being, which is why it can trigger the emotion of, say, crying while you watch a movie or a documentary. Why do you think that's happening? Because you are truly putting yourself in the position of the people in the movie. That's how powerful empathy can be. The fact that you're watching fiction and you still have deep empathy for the suffering human being on the screen. That is, uh, evidence that the point of empathy existing as a human quality is so we can understand and follow natural laws and follow the golden rule, if you want to use that term. Treat others how you would like to be treated. And when you can see somebody's pain and suffering or uncomfortableness with how you're treating them, then obviously it's your empathy which allows you to rationalize whether or not it's right or wrong and whether or not you would like to be treated that way. This is school children stuff, but unfortunately, this is lost on the vast majority of people, in my opinion. As long as there's something to gain, as long as they'll get away with it, as long as they're not out of pocket, they don't even give a second thought to the other person. The fact that such principles are so broadly shared and understood, despite cultural, generational, and geographical differences, speak to their roots in the intrinsic nature of being human, making them quintessential examples of natural law. So cultural, generational, and geographical differences. So natural law, it doesn't have any borders or any boundaries. You can't change it from one country to the next, from one state to the next, from one generation to the next. It's embedded into the nature of human beings. Number 11, the right to acquire property. The universally recognized right to acquire, use, enjoy, and dispose of property is another manifestation of natural law and represents the liberal idea of economic freedom. This principle is deeply ingrained in human nature and has been a critical factor in human progress and development. From ancient systems like feudalism, where land was recognized as a valuable asset, to contemporary property laws, which include intellectual property rights, the inherent understanding of one's right to acquire and control property is consistently upheld. Today, this natural law principle is recognized by international covenants such as Article 17 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. Freedom and property rights are inseparable. You can't have one without the other. And again, the right to acquire property is something that the sociopaths are trying to move us away from, our right to acquire and own property. They don't want you to have your own property. They want you to own nothing. And if you don't own your own property, then what freedom do you actually have? You go to work, to your slave job, you have the fruits of your labor stolen, and then you go to a dwelling which you don't own and which you have no freedom within that property. That's called socialism. The right to liberty. The right to liberty, understood as the freedom to live one's life without unwarranted restraint, represents a key aspect of natural law. This principle affirms that each individual has an inherent right to make decisions about their own life. Like, how many people you can have in your back garden, when you can see your parents, when you can see granny, when you can breathe freely, when you can stand within 6 feet of someone, to express themselves freely and to engage in the pursuit of happiness, so long as it does not infringe upon the rights of others. That is a natural right. Make decisions. Historically, the quest for liberty is reflected in numerous revolutions and movements, like the American and French revolutions of the 18th century, which were central around themes of liberty. Today, it is enshrined in numerous constitutions and international documents, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. These examples highlight how natural law principles continue to impact contemporary discourse, shaping societal norms, values, and legal frameworks worldwide. Number 13, right to defend oneself. The inherent right to defend oneself from harm is a universally acknowledged natural law. This principle supports an individual's right to prevent harm to their physical integrity or personal property. Recognized universally, the right manifests in a spectrum of ways, from the most basic physical self-defense against personal attacks to more evolved forms like legal recourse against defamation. This right's universal application is endorsed in various legal systems. As an example is the Stand Your Ground law in some US states, which protects individuals who use force, including lethal force, to defend themselves without any duty to evade or retreat from a dangerous situation. Stand your ground. And the picture on this slide is from the movie The Art of Self-Defense. And I would highly, highly recommend watching this movie, which absolutely embodies the philosophy and the right to defend oneself, standing your ground, using lethal force without any duty to run away. It's a natural right, unfortunately, being eroded through the man-made gun control laws. When you have in the UK, when you have a standing army of order followers who, on occasions, are armed with sophisticated weaponry, and you have nothing, you're already in a tyranny. You already cannot defend yourself. That is a complete tyranny. It's just, you are never, ever, ever going to be able to defend yourself as a society. And that's only going to lead in one direction. And it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that these things have happened. They're removing that right. Number 14, parental duties. Parental duties, or the responsibility of parents to care and provide for their offspring, is an excellent example of natural law. This principle originates from an innate understanding that parents, owing to their role in their children's creation and upbringing, have a responsibility to ensure their protection, survival, and growth. For instance, parental duties are not limited to humans, but are pervasive in the entire animal kingdom, where creatures exhibit protective behaviours towards their offspring, like a mother bear protecting her cubs. Moreover, nearly all nation states recognise parental responsibility in legal terms, mandating provisions for childcare, education, and safeguarding against neglect and abuse. These legislations often resonate with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, bolstering the common understanding of parental duties as a natural law. And again, the example of these rights being enshrined into legislation is not to promote man-made legislation. It's to demonstrate that obviously these rights are known and understood. And quite frankly, any parent who doesn't understand their responsibility for care, education, and safeguarding against neglect and abuse, the fact that we need to write these things down demonstrates how immoral a society we are in general terms, in the aggregate. The parents have a responsibility to ensure protection, survival, and growth, development, not handing them off to the child trauma centre so you can drive your fancy car, and not making your children feel obliged to have some sort of debt to you. I see that a lot in the baby boomer generation, who seem completely fixated on the idea that their children owe them something, and that the younger generations owe them something as a generation. Obviously, this is not a blanket statement. It's not intended to be a blanket statement when I say baby boomers, but in the main, they are completely inverted in their thinking when it comes to what their duties were, and still are as parents. They hung up on the idea that the generations beneath them have had an easier life, and that they didn't go through the tough times that they went through, and that they've got should have some sort of eternal gratitude and debt to them. That's what I get from the baby boomers. They seem completely lost that they decided to have children, and it's their moral obligation and responsibility to provide basic necessities for a child, such as protection, survival, and growth, putting a roof over their head, making sure they're fed, making sure that they're brought up and they understand the difference between right and wrong. Well, they failed in that. They don't even know the difference between right and wrong. Going off on a tangent about the baby boomers, this is something which has really, really, really gotten under my skin recently due to personal exchanges with certain people of this generation. Number 15, pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness, ingrained as an inherent human desire to seek joy and fulfillment, falls under the broad umbrella of natural law. This principle is universally recognized as each individual's innate right to strive toward their well-being, happiness, and personal fulfillment. And that, again, innate individual right is not something that we are afforded in this day and age. Well-being, happiness, and personal fulfillment, nope. Not unless, a lot of people believe that success is measured by money, and the more money that they've got, the better their well-being will be, their happiness and personal fulfillment. And to a certain degree, they've probably convinced themselves that that's right. But money doesn't buy you happiness. Money does not buy you well-being and personal fulfillment. So those people are lying to themselves. There is no personal fulfillment and happiness and well-being and being forced to hand over the fruits of your labor with threats of violence, being constantly living in a state of duress and threats of, the fear of being put in a cage like an animal if you don't comply. Any temporary release from that you might have on a weekend, for example, that is no justification for slavery and the removal of, being forced to live in a state where you can't strive towards well-being, happiness, and personal fulfillment. The importance of this principle is epitomized in foundational documents such as the United States Declaration of Independence, where it is affirmed as an unalienable right alongside life and liberty. It should be life, liberty, and private property, in my opinion. Pursuit of happiness will naturally come. I don't think you need to write that down if you've got life, liberty, actual liberty, and private property. It is a commitment to individual autonomy, personal growth, and human dignity, irrespective of societal or cultural contexts. making it a core element of natural law. Conclusions. Natural law encompasses universal principles and values intrinsic to human nature that shape our moral compass irrespective of cultural, political, or temporal differences. From duties like making restitution or honouring contracts to rights such as defending oneself or acquiring property, its applications are woven into the fabric of our societies. Codes of law and collective conscience. These principles and values, often framed in scholarly discourse and applied in real-world scenarios, underline our understanding of ethics, justice, and human rights. Dedicated exploration of natural law thus allows us to navigate the complexities of moral, legal, and socio-political landscapes, making it an indispensable tool in our quest to understand and enhance the human condition. And the human condition will only advance and enhance if we apply the principles of natural law, apply the principles of morality, understand that the consequences of immoral behavior in the aggregate is just more rules, more man-made rules, more slavery, more tyranny, until we actually become conscious and start understanding objective morality and stop carrying out behaviors which are immoral. And that could be anything from how you treat your neighbor, how you treat others around you, how you treat people on the street, to what job you do and what the impacts of that job are for society as a whole. Is it moral? Does it cause harm? Is it immoral? Does it cause harm? Or the order following army who are carrying out orders given to them by delusional governments who believe that they have the right to control us like slaves. It's the order followers who carry out the actions required to enforce those immoral laws, those petty man-made laws. That's the quest to enhancing the human condition. Thanks for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed that presentation on morality in nature. I hope that's provided a sound argument that morals are indeed objective and that is the path to freedom. And please tune in again. For now, I'm feeling a bit peckish, so I'll see you later.
Open your mind, see the change you can't see. They never needed metal. They built a cage in your beliefs. They never needed whips, never needed chains. They conditioned your mind just to love your cage. Taught you to bow, taught you to kneel. Told you control was the way to feel safe and healed. But fear is the weapon that keeps you blind. Make you praise your oppressor while they tax your time. You call it freedom, but how can that be when you need their permission just to live and breathe?
They sold you lies, dressed them up as truth. Made you trust the hands that put the news. But the weight don't fade when the chains ain't steel. Cause the mind can be captive just like the heel. Wake up, can't you see? The only true law is morality. No kings, no masters, no ties that bind. Only truth can free your mind. They gave
gave you a flag, told you to wave it, made you believe that their power could save it. Authority's a sickness, a faith in control, a system that thrives on the theft of your soul. You pray to the state, it's a church in disguise, with rituals, symbols, and sermons of lies. They promise you order, but only through force, while they write all the rules and they change up the course. They sold you lies, dressed them up as truth, made you trust the hands that put the news. But the weight don't fade when the chains ain't steel, cause the mind can be captive just like the heel. Wake up, can't you see? The only true law is morality. No kings, no masters, no ties that bind. Only truth can free your mind.
They poison the youth with a state-run class. Teach them to follow, obey, never ask. They program belief like a line of code. Download submission straight to the soul. Bad inputs make a broken machine. Society's built on corrupted routines, but freedom ain't given, it's something we earn. And truth is the fire that makes the world turn.
What if the rulers ain't wiser than you? What if they profit from hiding the truth? What if morality's not up for debate, and power itself is a virus of hate? You ain't born to be ruled, ain't born to obey. The chains are illusions, they break when you say a world with no masters, no force, no deceit. Just people in balance with truth as their creed.
They lied, said power brings peace. That's fiction, it's chains in disguise, sold with conviction. Fear is their God and control is the sermon, but I spit fire like the soul of a free man burning. I see laws as cages, I see truth as flame, and the world gone mad playing obedience games. There's no order when you're forced to kneel. That's not law, that's just theft made real. So I break the cycle, I reject their throne, cause natural law is the creed I own. They sell obedience like it's holy ground, but what's divine about knees on the ground? You ain't free if you're still asking please. That ain't liberty, just dressed up decrees. I walk with truth, not a badge or a flag. No crown, no judge, no system to drag. I don't need a master, I got moral code, built from the soul, not a scroll or a robe. Tear it down, every fake throne and fable. If it ain't voluntary, it ain't stable. Truth is law, and that's the line. No kings, no chains, mic drop, I free my mind. Free my leg, free my mind.